listener production.
Hey, Chris Spyrou with you. Welcome to The Briefing. Some of the world's biggest comedians are pocketing hundreds of thousands, potentially millions at the moment, telling jokes about sex and grindr in a country where speaking your mind freely can actually get you executed.
It's not sensible when Saudi citizens can laugh, maybe, at these jokes, but they're actually not even able to tell jokes on stage. And the comedians that are joining as part of this tour are explicitly restricting themselves on talking about the most important issues in the kingdom regarding human rights issues.
That deep dive into Saudi Arabia's comedy festival, why human rights groups are calling it a distraction, and for comedians like Kevin Hart, Pete Davidson and Jim Jefferies to think twice about it, is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Tara Cassidy. It's Thursday, the 9th of October.
Hey Chris, and to you listening, we're starting in Sydney where police are on the hunt for a gunman who shot dead a man in the city's northwest in what they're describing as a brazen and targeted daylight attack. Emergency services were called to Riverstone around 6 p.m. yesterday, where they found a man believed to be in his 30s with gunshot wounds. He was treated by paramedics but was unable to be revived and died at the scene.
About 15 minutes into establishing a crime scene, police were then called to a nearby street where a red Audi had been set alight. And while fireys were extinguishing that blaze, they were then called to another car fire just 3 minutes up the road. Both fires were extinguished, but both the red Audi and white van were destroyed in those fires. Area Commander Superintendent Jason Joyce says officers are working to determine whether the three incidents are related.
We set up a crime scene at the three different locations. It's very brazen and it's a shame that this is happening in our community. You'd want to think that in a residential area like that, people could wander the streets at that time of night and be safe. But we do believe it's a targeted attack. My heart goes out to the family of this victim and certainly any of the people that witnessed it.
He went on to say that they're exploring all options, including potential links to organised crime. Now, that comes just a day after tactical police intercepted an alleged kill team in peak hour traffic in Sydney's southwest.
Yeah, police allege the three men, aged 18, 19 and 26, were en route to carry out a contracted hit on a man picking up his child at a daycare centre in Revesby on Tuesday. Police allege the trio, who were found with guns, balaclavas, body-worn cameras and jerry cans of fuel, were hired by an international drug syndicate.
Now, all three have since been charged with conspiracy to commit murder and participating in a criminal group, with the youngest of the group on bail for 17 cases of break and enter when he was arrested on Tuesday. Two of the three men have appeared in court and didn't apply for bail, remaining in custody, while the third is due to face court today.
A former homicide detective on the William Tyrell case says he's reading between the lines in the police's search for missing 4-year-old Gus Lamont and believes they're now looking at other possibilities to the child simply wandering off. Augustus Gus Lamont was last seen around 5 o'clock on Saturday, September the 27th, playing on a dirt mound on his family's 24,000-hectare remote sheep station in South Australia. His grandmother says she left him alone for half an hour, and when she went to call him inside, he was gone, sparking a now near 2-week-long ground and air search, with Gus's parents warned it's unlikely he'll be found alive.
Now, according to police, the property has been searched head to toe, including a dam several kilometres from where the 4-year-old was last seen and near where a small boot print was located, which authorities later confirmed was not Gus's. One of the search volunteers, Jason O'Connell, who has helped in the search for Gus and who has over 20 years' experience with the SES, told Seven he's never come across a case where there's been no trace of the missing person at all.
I just don't get how he vanished like that. It's been searched. He's not there. It's not going to happen. A wedge-tail will pick up a kilo or two. They're not going to pick up a 4-year-old. There's no pigs, there's no wild dogs, there's no foxes.
Meanwhile, police say they are now looking at other possibilities outside of just searching the property.
We will never give up hope of finding Gus. There are further lines of inquiry being undertaken, and the family have continued to cooperate fully with police and have consented to every request that we have made of them thus far.
According to former investigator Gary Jubilan, who was involved in the William Tyrell case, he believes police are considering whether a person's involved. He says children disappearing on their own accord at such a young age is very rare.
I think lessons have been learnt with what happened with William.
What I'm seeing now and what I'm reading between the lines with what South Australian Police, they're looking at the other possibilities, that there was perhaps intervention.
Now, authorities have emphasised that they are still appealing for information from the public, while they are also awaiting results from a freshly taken infrared drone search that they're expecting the results from in coming weeks.
The Australian Federal Police is set to be given new powers, allowing them to possess and share child sexual abuse material in their efforts to catch offenders online. According to The Guardian, the laws will be adjusted to ensure investigators aren't committing any crimes themselves. Rather, it's to help them not be suspected or caught while investigating child sex offenders and pedophiles when they're communicating and trading material in online networks. Now, this comes after horrific allegations of child abuse in childcare centres in Australia have been revealed in multiple cases in recent years, including that of Joshua Dale Brown in Victoria and Ashley Paul Griffiths in New South Wales and Queensland.
Yeah, that's right. And Chris, having spoken to police about these cases, including John Rouse, one of the lead experts in this space in Australia, a number of the most serious cases that people have been hearing about in the news in recent years, these offenders are using these online networks. And it's the place where they share information on how to get close to kids, how to deceive parents, and kind of what professions to go into, but also how they work is basically to enter this space and to move up the chain and be able to access more serious and perverted kinds of content. You have to gain other users' trust, and they basically require you to prove yourself by sharing child abuse material and then creating and sharing your own to kind of build rapport. And so investigators, to be able to crack down on these offenders, they're having to assume their identities to try and infiltrate the networks and gather evidence.
Yeah, and look, it's a horrible job based on everything you've just described. It is a horrible job, but also it's the most successful way that authorities have been able to catch these predators to date. So unfortunately, as John Rouse explained, our supposed child safety measures aren't working. Only proactive police work has caught these people to date. So that's why we're seeing the movement here.
Qantas is one of nearly 40 global companies hit with a ransom demand from a hacker group. The airline has been given until Friday to begin negotiations with hacker collective Scattered Lapsus Hunters, who are threatening to release more stolen data unless they're paid.
It's understood that this is information about both customers and employees and includes date of births, purchase histories, passport numbers, and potentially frequent flyer numbers as well. According to reports, the information was stolen between April 2024 and September 2025 and includes data from Qantas's major cyber attack back in June that impacted up to 6 million of its customers. And as to how Scattered Lapsus Hunters did it, they claim to have hacked 39 Salesforce databases. So those are those databases used by a lot of the world's companies to manage customer data, sales, etc., etc. So that's why we're seeing not only Qantas here, but also companies like Toyota, Disney, Macca's, Puma, Adidas, Cartier, Chanel, and IKEA.
Oh gosh, not IKEA. Now, the group is demanding both the victim companies and Salesforce contact them by tomorrow. Now, Qantas hasn't confirmed whether it's planning to engage with the hackers, but a spokesperson says their 24-hour support line is open for anybody that's been impacted.
And one Miss Dolly Parton's got a message for the world. She's still working 9 to 5 and she ain't dead yet. Now, this all comes, Tara, after her sister sent social media into a spin yesterday, sharing a cryptic message online saying she'd been up all night praying for Dolly and asking for the world to send their prayers to her sister. It sparked an onslaught of fans wild sharing their concerns about the country star's health.
Yes, but Dolly has clapped back at the rumours, as well as this bizarre AI photo of her at her deathbed that's been circulating online. She says she is doing just fine.
I know lately everybody thinks that I am sicker than I am. Do I look sick to you? I'm working hard here. Anyway, I wanted to put everybody's mind at ease. Anyway, there's just a lot of rumors flying around, and I'm not ready to die yet.
Amen, sister, amen.
Yeah, apparently she's been a bit under the weather thanks to a kidney stone infection. She's had to cancel a few things to undergo surgery, but overall she is A-okay, Chris, and her sister also apologised for scaring, well, everyone.
Yeah, I love this. Immediately last night I was Googling Dolly's age and just making sure that she's, not at... not at that ripe age of taking... Look, she hasn't cracked 80 yet, so we've still got, I think, a few more years in Dolly. I was just hoping this wasn't an Ozzy Osbourne situation where,
oh, no.
you know, they rolled him out for the farewell tour. Everyone was like, oh, God, Ozzy's about to die. And the family was like, no, he's doing fine. And then, boom, dead.
Oh, no.
So,
oh, no.
yeah, I was really hoping we're not in that situation. And look, by the sounds of it, we're not, which is great news.
Yeah, look, I think for looking at that video, she was looking very fresh. I think she's going to be okay, everyone. Looking fresh. Now, that brings our headlines to a close for today. But coming up next is your deep dive, Chris, on why some of the world's biggest comedians are making millions in Saudi Arabia and why it runs a little deeper than you think. Have a listen to that deep dive. It's coming up next.
Being paid to tell sex jokes by the Saudi government is probably a sentence you didn't expect to hear. But that's exactly what's happening right now in the country's capital in what's been billed as the largest comedy festival in the world. It's the first ever Riyadh Comedy Festival. It's been running for the last 2 weeks, and while some of the A-listers who've performed in the Saudi capital have earned some pretty big laughs and even bigger checks, they've also copped heat from fans and fellow comedians.
I mean, how do you even promote that? You know, like, from the folks that brought you 9/11, 2 weeks of laughter in the desert. Don't miss it!
You know, I've been getting a little bit of flack just because, like, my dad died 9/11, so they're like, how could you possibly go there? I just, you know, I get the routing and then I see the number and I go, I'll go.
Okay. We're talking Pete Davidson, who you just heard from, Aussie Jim Jefferies, Louis C.K., Kevin Hart, Bill Burr, Jimmy Carr, Dave Chappelle. These are all the names that are part of that star-studded lineup, and there's more than just Pete who's defended their appearances amid criticisms they're helping a brutal regime, the Saudi government, distract the world from its abuses.
It was a mind-blowing experience. Definitely top 3 experiences I've ever had. I think it's going to lead to a lot of positive things.
They're paying me $375,000 for one show. Now, a lot of other people are getting $1.6 million. They're paying me enough money to look the other way. I'm being paid a lot of money to not care about what they do in their country.
That was Bill Burr there and Tim Dillon after him. A note, Tim was actually dropped from the lineup after making those comments on his podcast. So what exactly do the Saudi government do that we should care about? And how is this festival part of a larger plan to dupe people like you and I into spending our money there? Michael Page is a Deputy Middle East Director at Human Rights Watch, and he joins me now. Michael, welcome to the briefing. Your organisation is among those saying this is about deflecting negative attention away from the country. What can you tell us about Saudi Arabia's human rights record at the moment?
So Saudi authorities have a dismal record on human rights writ large, but also specifically on this topic of comedy and speech, it has a horrific record on free speech. So Saudi Arabia is ruled by an autocratic crown prince named Mohammed bin Salman. As part of his rise to power, he cracked down on essentially any opposition in the country. And over this kind of past period since roughly 2017, he has shut down essentially all dissent in the country. So women's rights activists, free speech defenders, human rights individuals, journalists. These are individuals who have been imprisoned. Sometimes they've been executed. And of course, maybe most well known is that this type of repression has extended outside the country. So infamously in 2018, in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Saudi state agents murdered a journalist who was working for a U.S. newspaper called The Washington Post. His name was Jamal Khashoggi, and he was brutally murdered, cut to pieces, and there was never accountability for any of these crimes. And so these comedians are going to a country where there really is no free speech for anyone else to enjoy.
Some of these comedians, you know, they have said on the record that this was all about money for them. It's a cash grab. But there have been others that have come out to defend performing as part of the festival. And they've said they went over there with the intention to open minds, having brought in jokes about sex, gay people, trans people, women driving, etc., etc. Do you think this festival, though, can really bring social change inside Saudi Arabia, given everything you've just detailed?
I think it's really important for people to have access to culture, to music, events. That's a great thing. I think we really want to have a degree of nuance here. What is happening is that these comedians, many of whom take really strong stands on free speech, including Australian comedians like Jim Jefferies, right? They are coming into a contract with Saudi authorities, right? Because this is hosted by the Saudi government, saying they're not going to talk about the government, they're not going to talk about religion. And so these comedians are doing this in a place where essentially no one else has this freedom. And so I think that's a real problem. Many of these individuals have said, oh, I'm going because I want to connect with the Saudi people. But it's not sensible when Saudi citizens can laugh, maybe, at these jokes, but they're actually not even able to tell jokes on stage. I think it's kind of notable that there's really no Saudi comedians in this. And the comedians that are joining as part of this tour are explicitly restricting themselves on talking about the most important issues in the kingdom regarding human rights issues.
And this isn't the first time the Saudi government's flown in big names. We've seen artists like Mariah Carey, Janet Jackson, 50 Cent all be paid to perform there in the past. Now, this lineup, though, this not only includes huge names in the comedy world generally, but it's also those comics who happen to have huge podcasts or huge digital footprints. What do you make of this shift?
I think it's an interesting one because if you see the lineup of comedians, I can't deny these are some of the most talented comedians that are performing these days. Individuals such as Bill Burr, Sam Morril, Jim Jefferies, Kevin Hart, Aziz Ansari. And so it's one in which I think the kingdom is branching out in terms of how extensive they're trying to bring kind of cultural performance into the kingdom, but also in part to silence it. And so we've seen that in which not only have there been musicians that have been invited, but also that Saudi Arabia has, as a state in its public investment fund, the Saudi Arabia's Sovereign Wealth Fund, they've helped purchase Newcastle United, right? Which is, a major football club in the UK. They are hosting the 2034 FIFA World Cup in Saudi Arabia. And so I think they are using just billions of dollars of state money essentially across the kind of cultural, sporting, music event spectrum. And what that does is it really silences a number of kind of performers from commenting on Saudi rights issues or Gulf rights issues across the board.
And we do know that this is part of their Vision 2030 plan, which is essentially a plan to make them a cultural and entertainment powerhouse by 2030, so in the next 5 years. What are some other elements to this Vision 2030 plan that everyday people just might not be across or might not know?
One is that this in some ways is the people's money, right? This is money that's largely derived from fossil fuel wealth that Saudi Arabia has. This is at the disposal of the crown prince himself to spend. And so I think one thing that's often overlooked is, Saudi citizens never chose, for instance, for these billions of dollars to go to comedians or buying football teams, as opposed to fixing the public infrastructure, supporting better welfare. And so this is money in which should belong to the Saudi people, but there's not at all any type of democratic oversight over it. This money is not only being used by a ruler without any checks or balances, but it's often going to whitewash the very abuses that Saudi citizens are suffering from.
Do events like this and entertainment spectacles and bringing in big A-listers to the country, does it make it harder for people and governments to hold Saudi Arabia accountable? Because they can turn to the world stage and go, well, look, we can bring people, we can attract big events here, we can host major sporting events. Does that give them some sort of, leeway and room to be off limits to global governments?
Sadly, yes. If you're a government who, for instance, is approving arms sales to Saudi Arabia, and you say, look, they're hosting the World Cup, they're hosting major events, left and right, they're hosting, A-list talent, who am I to be the one saying, oh, no, this is someone that is beyond the pale for Australia, for the US, for the UK to do business with, to work with? So I do think there's a clear political kind of role and angle in this to essentially soften and change the image. And I think you can see that even in some of these more niche investments by Saudi authorities, like Live Golf, right, in which they've essentially tried to take over the PGA Tour. Golf is often a sport, linked to high-level businesses, corporations, kind of like more rarefied and elitist. Saudi Arabia has kind of chosen to invest in this space to simply make it more amenable, more welcoming for certain types of kind of business and foreign direct investments. So yes, I do think it's a strategy. Whether it will ultimately be successful, I don't know, but I also think it's something that, everyday stars, comedian, cultural and sports figures, I think it's really important that if they're considering going to Saudi Arabia, performing in Saudi Arabia, the question for us isn't, should you boycott or not? The question is, can you speak up about the fundamental rights and not at least silence yourself, if you're going to perform, in these events?
And to add to the list of, niche investments, we did hear this week of a deal, an $84 billion Australian dollar deal to buy one of the world's biggest video game developers, EA Games. That's something that the Saudi government has invested in. So, this isn't just about creating tourism. Like you said, there are political motives here. I am curious to know, before we let you go, what would your message be to someone who sees all this glitz, comedy, concerts, mega projects, and thinks to themselves, well, Saudi's cleaning itself up and it could be a really good holiday destination?
We've seen a number of instances where there is a public image put out by countries and it is explicitly hiding abuses. And I think you don't have to look that hard. This is one where it's really difficult to ignore that just a couple years ago, the Saudi government chopped up a journalist because they didn't like what he wrote. Just this summer, Saudi Arabia executed a journalist just because they didn't like, what he worked on in terms of how he expressed himself. That there are women and men who are doing things such as rejecting kind of conservative laws or laws on how people kind of dress or behave, and they go to jail for years at a time. I think individuals should really keep that in mind when they are thinking about, this is a lovely destination. There are millions and millions of migrant workers in Saudi Arabia. They are the ones who are responsible for building much of the infrastructure for the FIFA 2034 World Cup. And we and many other groups have documented scores of horrific abuses, deaths in workplace, failure of payment, sometimes for years on end. And so when people are thinking about, participating, traveling, etc., I think it's just really important to keep that in mind.
Michael Page, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thank you so much.
That was Deputy Middle East Director at Human Rights Watch, Michael Page, speaking with me there. And that is it for this episode of The Briefing. If you found it interesting or you learnt something new, why not flick it over to a mate? And while you're there, leave us a rate and a review. I'm Spyrou. Catch you next time.